exchange of information. We'll start off the evening with the candidates will do a 2-minute introductory statement, and they come in the order that they appear on the ballot. So the House of Delegate candidates will be first, followed by the sheriffs. Then we will go into the question-answer portion, and I will alternate between questions for the delegates and questions for the sheriffs. Questions from the audience. We encourage you to raise your hand and ask a question. We will have a microphone going around. If anybody's having laryngitis or really doesn't feel comfortable speaking, we do have some index cards available, so you can ask for that. Okay, so now we will begin without any further ado, and I'll introduce Mark Keem from District 35.
Well, thank you very much, Peggy, and I want to thank Flint on behalf of the Providence District Council for organizing this as well, and all the members.
1 second. Can we raise the podium?
Yeah.
This has to get closer.
This. Oh, there's Mike there.
There's the mic, yeah.
Because everything is based on it being
Okay.
5 foot tall.
If you hold, you pull.
Is that
I
good?
forgot about that.
Thank you.
Does that work?
Vertically challenged.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm a very short person, so this I thought this would be adequate for me. But then you also have Marcus and David Bulova here too. So I guess so. Okay, let me start again. And clock person, could I get the 10 seconds back? Okay. Okay. Well, good. Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. And let me start by thanking the League of Women Voters, the Providence District Council, all the volunteers and the members who've put in the time and effort to do this. Every single one of you who are giving up a Tuesday night to be here to listen to candidates like us, you are what makes democracy work. Let me also welcome all of you to the 35th House District. I've had the tremendous honor and the privilege of representing this district for the last 4 years in the General Assembly. And frankly, 4 years ago when I first ran for office, had anybody told me that I'd be doing this today, I probably wouldn't have believed it too much, only because I'm somewhat of an unlikely candidate who ran for office. But 4 years later, as I was putting together this campaign and as I decided to run for another term, I thought about all the things that I've been able to do and work on, and I put it on one little brochure, and I do a lot of social media, so I try to keep it at about 140 characters each. I couldn't do that, but what I've tried to focus on has been transportation, education, the economy, and trying to make this community's quality of life as great as it can be. But what this brochure does not tell you is the motivation I have behind it. Those are the issues that I care about. Those are the things that I work on every single day. But the motivation for why I do this for public service is my passion. As somebody who came to America as a young child, my passion is to make this country live up to its democracy and the rules. And especially today, when we're looking at what's happening across the river in Potomac, it is disgraceful what's happening in Washington. The partisan gridlock has stopped our government from functioning. I want to make sure that our government in Virginia will never face those issues. So I will work with anybody, Republicans, Democrats, across gender, across religion, across regions, with everybody to get things done. And I've tried to mold myself into the character of a career of somebody like Jim Scott, who's given us 20 years of that kind of public service. And so with your support, hopefully I'll be able to continue that service. And so I look forward to answering your questions. But again, thank you for being here today.
Mark's opponent, Leanne Lippin-Luce, could not be here tonight, but Anton Luce is going to give her 2-minute introductory comment. The proxies can do the introductory comment, but they cannot take any questions from the audience. But hopefully we'll have some one-on-one time afterwards, and then you can talk to them.
Yes, good evening and thank you. And I hope that anyone that looked at the nameplate and then my face noticed that I was a proxy tonight. My name is Anton Luce, and I am standing in proxy for Leanne, who is running for the House of Delegates in the 35th District. The 35th District includes Vienna, part of Oakton, Tyson's Corner, Dunloring, and a little bit of McLean. And Leanne is sorry she couldn't be here tonight, as she's the secretary of the Consumer Protection Commission of Fairfax County, and they had a vote tonight, and so that's why I'm here in her stead. The Consumer Protection Commission, as you can probably tell by the name, protects consumers from faulty business practices. Now, it's actually interesting that we're in this room tonight because Leanne went to Thoreau Middle School. I didn't. I've never been here before, but she went here. She probably played in this actual room. And so I've heard stories about her and her sisters playing here, and so this will be interesting for me to relay back to her. But one of the things that I know about Leanne, and I found out quickly once we got married this past summer, was that when we moved in together, as we got married, and I brought my furniture, she brought hers, And I started finding out that she saw hers very differently than mine. And I found out that every piece that she has, everything that she's invested in, she doesn't invest in just with the idea of creating a nice home, but actually she's thinking about her children. She's thinking about, will they be able to use this or not? And she brings that into everything that she does and everything that she'll do in government, and that conviction runs through everything else that she does. And so again, I can't take questions on Leanne's behalf, but you can find her on Leanne Luce on Facebook, and you can email us at leanne@lucefordelegate.com. Thank you again.
Okay, from District 37, we have David Bolivar.
Do I need to raise this up, Mr. Southworth? There we go. All right, very good. It's fantastic to be here. My name is David Bolivar. I represent the 37th District, and I've done that for the last 8 years. It's been a real privilege. I only have one precinct left, Mosby, after redistricting, but I very much cherish that one Providence precinct. By way of background, I grew up in Fairfax County, went to the College of William and Mary, came back with my wife, and we decided we wanted to raise our 3 children in the same place that we grew up in because it had such a great quality of life. And so when we settled down, we decided we wanted to give back to that community that had been so good to us. And so both my wife and I got involved in civic organizations. I was active in my civic association, joined Brain Injury Services, was a member of the Rotary Club of Annandale, and also served as the chair of the Fairfax County Consumer Protection Commission for 7 years. It was that same kind of spirit that I wanted to be able to take down to the House of Delegates. And so as a member of the House of Delegates, I really focused on problem solving and making sure that we're making the investments to keep up our quality of life here in Fairfax County. On transportation, I was very proud to support the bipartisan transportation plan that will result in $300 million per year here in Fairfax County. It really shows the power of compromise if you're willing to sit down and work across the aisle. On education, I've worked to bring our fair share of funding up here and also pass successful legislation to cut some of the bureaucracy and outdated mandates to put that funding directly into our schools, and was also ahead of the curve on ethics issues. I've been very active not only trying to beef up ethics beforehand, I was a co-patron of a piece of legislation, but also trying to take gerrymandering out of our political process. When I first ran for office, I promised 3 things, and that was to listen, it was to work hard, and to always keep the best interests of my constituents at heart. And so I've really focused on making sure I'm out there in the community, doing constituent surveys, town hall meetings, and it's that very same spirit that I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight, and thank you, and looking forward to your questions.
And Patrice Winter from District 37. I need a stool.
I think I might have to bring it back down. So this one's, this one here, this one, that one, okay, there we go. Deal? Hi, everyone. My name is Patrice Winter, and I'm running for delegate of the 37th District. I want to thank the Providence District Council and the League of Women Voters, and this is the 4th forum that the League has done, and they've all been very good, so thank you so much. I am a mother of 2 adult children. My daughter's in Azerbaijan with the Peace Corps. My son is finishing up in Chicago in college. And I am an educator. I am a local businesswoman, a healthcare provider, and a former elected official. I was on city council in the city of Fairfax for 3 terms. I now am on faculty. I'm in my encore career at George Mason. I teach in health-related curriculum, and I also do research with breast cancer survivors. I have been a physical therapist for a long time, 36 years. And I owned a physical therapy business during that time, 17 years, before I went on with Mason. I'm very passionate about serving in my community and have been involved with homeowners associations and school associations, PTAs, and neighborhood affiliations. And in my time as a business owner, I was also involved with a lot of the business associations within the Fairfax area. Many people have said that we need more healthcare professionals and small business owners and educators in Richmond, and I'm a package deal. I bring all 3 to the table. And I hope that I can, earn your trust and your support and your vote for November. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay, from District 41, Eileen Filler-Corn couldn't be here tonight, but her aide, Garrett McGuire, is going to do her introductory comments.
Good evening. My name's Garrett. I'm here representing Delegate Eileen Filler-Corn.
It's going down. Okay.
We're good? Okay. Thank you for inviting us tonight. Delegate Filler-Corn sends her regrets. She's at West Springfield High School where her daughter's on the cheer team. They have a big cheer competition tonight, so she's there cheering them on.
This doesn't turn. Sorry.
Good? We'll test it, yeah.
Maybe just take this. It's too much weight.
Okay.
Just too much weight. There we go.
We got the introduction. I'll keep going. Basically, I'm here representing Delegate Filler-Corn. Delegate Filler-Corn was first elected in 2010 during a special election, and since then has represented the 41st District, which since 2011 includes the Mantua and Price precincts of Providence. Delegate Filler-Corn has always prided herself on focusing on the issues that matter most to her constituents, which include education, transportation, jobs in the economy, and public safety. When she's out knocking doors, these are the issues that she hears the most about. This past year, she was proud to be part of the bipartisan transportation package as a member of the Transportation and Finance Committees. She played a pivotal role from the beginning in the passage of this legislation. She knows how important it is for our area and was happy to be part of the process. In addition to the Transportation and Finance Committees, she also serves on the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committees, the Joint Commission on Transportation Accountability, and the Joint Commission on Technology and Science. This year, she's proud to have earned the endorsement from several diverse organizations, which include the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce, Virginia Education Association, Police Benevolent Association, Fairfax County Firefighters, Northern Virginia Tech PAC, and the League of Conservation Voters. And we'll be here all night, so if you have any questions, feel free to find me at the end. Thank you.
Chris DiCarlo is also in this district, and he's opted to just say his introductory remarks when we get to the sheriff. Okay, so District 53, we have Marcus Simon.
Thank you. All right, Jim, can you hear me okay? All right, I'll talk loud enough that the microphone can pick me up from almost anywhere. My name's Marcus Simon, and I'm running for the House of Delegates from the 53rd District. I've been running since really the beginning of March, and I've realized it's kind of hard to explain to a lot of people what district they're in. You can give them the district number, and almost nobody knows their district number. So then I start to describe the geography of it. They think they live in your district. No, you live across the street. And I figured the best way, I found out the best way to explain to somebody what district they're in is to start going through the list of names. If you start going through the list, Mark Keem, oh yeah, that's right, it's Mark Keem's district. David Bullock, okay, that's my guy. So when I want to explain what, where the 53rd is, what I have to explain to everybody is that I am in Jim Scott's district. And everybody's like, okay, well I get it now. Now I know, but what's going on? Why are you running against Jim Scott? So the next thing I have to explain to everybody is that Jim Scott's retiring. And then they're upset about that for a minute. And then they try and get to know me a little bit. And hopefully I can win them over. So I'm Marcus Simon. I'm running for Jim Scott's seat in the House of Delegates. Jim and Nancy are here. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Jim's represented Providence District in some way, shape, or form since 1973. 71. I almost shortchanged him by 2 years. And Jim announced at the end of this legislative session that he was not going to seek re-election. So I threw my hat into the ring, and I'm very pleased and proud to be able to say that Jim's endorsed my candidacy for the House of Delegates. And usually, when I'm at the doors, I've knocked on about 13,000 doors so far, usually that's all I have to say. When I get through the part where I say Jim's endorsed me, they're like, oh, that's good, get out of here, go on, knock on some other doors. If you're good enough for Jim Scott, then you're good enough for us. But occasionally I've got to get into some of the issues, and so what people want to hear about on the doors are things like transportation, the traffic that we spend so much time in, education. I've got a daughter, I've got two children, I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. My 5th grader is in a class here in Fairfax County with 33 other kids. That's too many. We need to work on class size, we need to work on better teacher pay, we need to work on education issues. And then finally, jobs in the economy, the sequester, the budget shutdown, all of that's still in play. The federal government is not going to be the employer that it once was. We've got to diversify our economy, attract more jobs to the area. And I'm out of time. I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, and now we'll move into the sheriff's candidates, and first candidate is Stacy Kincaid.
That one. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy Kincaid, and I am a 26-year veteran of the Fairfax Sheriff's Office. After I graduated from college, I began my career, and I'm currently serving in the rank of captain. So how as sheriff will I move our agency forward? Fairfax County is a very diverse county, and the Sheriff's Office in Fairfax, which is the largest in the state, must respect and reflect that diversity. As an elected official, the sheriff is in a unique position to cultivate relationships with residents. And as your sheriff, I will be establishing volunteer outreach groups because I believe in working collaboratively with residents to create safer communities. Also, second, I have a long history of reaching out and working with many groups. I was recognized with an Outstanding Performance Award for my leadership as the agency's first occupational health and safety officer and peer support coordinator. I'm also a graduate of Leadership Fairfax, and I sit on the governing board to prevent and end homelessness. And I am the recipient of our agency's highest honor, which is the Distinguished Service Award. And finally, in this economy, the sheriff has to ensure that taxpayers' money is being well spent. And I will review all contracts, processes, and practices to find greater efficiencies. So I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank the Fairfax Deputy Sheriff's Coalition, as well as SEIU 512, and the Fairfax County Professional Firefighters and Paramedics for their support and endorsement of me. And I'd also, so I don't leave anyone out, and again, that district number and everything, yeah, I get a little confused myself, but I'd like to thank the following senators: Dave Marsden, Janet Howe, Chap Peterson, Dick Saslaw, and the delegates Dave Bulova, Eileen Fillercorn, Mark Keem, and Jim Scott, and the Democratic members of the Fairfax School Board for their support and their endorsement of my campaign. Thank you for voting on November 5th for me.
Brian Wolf had a conflict tonight, and he has a proxy, Jim Procuna.
I'm definitely not Brian, because he's a lot younger, but I got more hair. That's all right. You'll probably see it online before you get a chance to. So I'm going to do my best to fill in for him tonight. I'm honored to speak on behalf of Brian Wolf, known to his friends and family as B.A. B.A. has lived and worked in Fairfax County most of his life. He's a recently retired City of Fairfax police officer with 26 years of service and was twice named Police Officer of the Year. He also served his country 4 years in the U.S. Air Force prior to joining the police department. Aside from bringing integrity back to the sheriff's office, B.A. has two main things he wants to implement during the next 2 years. His first priority will be to install video recording equipment in the Adult Detention Center. B.A. does not understand why the Adult Detention Center has never had video recording capability, which would not only protect deputies from frivolous lawsuits by inmates, but would also help to deter inmate-on-inmate crime. Video recording is like insurance. You have it hoping you never need it, but are sure glad you do when something happens. Secondly, a large percentage of criminal activities, including the recent mass shootings across our nation, are committed by persons with mental illness. Because of the major healthcare budget cuts, the Adult Detention Center has become a warehouse for the mentally ill, with law enforcement becoming the first line of intervention in mental health care. BA wants to implement a program already in place at law enforcement agencies and detention centers across the nation called the Crisis Intervention Team, which trains law enforcement officers to better deal with the increasing number of mentally ill persons in our community. To further understand this vital program, BA is currently attending a 3-day Crisis Intervention Team Conference in Hartford, Connecticut. That's why I'm here tonight to speak on his behalf. In addition, the Virginia Police Officers Benevolent Association carefully and thoroughly interviews all candidates for office before they make an endorsement decision. BA is pleased and proud to announce that he received the PBA's endorsement. And finally, Brian is so committed to bringing change to the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office that he has pledged, if elected sheriff, that he will donate his entire 2-year salary of $320,000 to Fairfax charities. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to introduce Chris DiCarlo.
Good evening. I'm Chris DiCarlo. I run as the independent, and so I try to represent the independent's perspective. I've been running now for about 4 years in different offices. This is the first time I've run for sheriff. I've learned with each election that what I'm really running against is political corruption. And what we're really all looking for is a government we can trust. It's as simple as that. So, as an independent, you get excluded from a lot of the high-profile candidate forums, such as Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce, or anything big at George Mason where the TV's involved. So, to kind of counter that, I decided to create rap. And so I created rap videos, and I put them on YouTube. And so I've just created my 5th. And so to give you a different taste of things, I'm going to rap for you. You're not going to have the music. You got to see it on YouTube. But this is a Western genre rap video, and it's about fighting Big Brother because he wants to take me out because I'm not corruptible. So anyway, you're going to miss part of it, but you'll get the most of it. And I might add a little emotion just to kind of give it some flavor. I'm not with a party. I got my own voice. Don't vote to the left or right. You got a better choice. They're lying and cheating and putting us on hold, man. The power of the people's been dropped from the program. Honest everyday workers got to be in control, not the bankers and the brokers who were born without a soul. Now we're in a state of perpetual neglect caused by the greed of the crooks we elect. The sheriff's supposed to protect the Constitution, so why is he the problem and not the solution? I want to do more than just ride on the range and spit the truth from the street. I want to make change. Let's go to work, start catching these thieves. Nobody's checking them, they do as they please. Taking our hope and stealing our trust, put a star on my chest and I'll shackle these mutts. They're shooting up the government every single day in back alley deals where the dough gets the sway. I'm not going to play the game the way they arranged it, but once I get elected, I'll damn sure change it. We need a jolt to the system like a sheriff that raps, a free-thinking guy that won't fall in the traps. Now I have your attention, your trust is what I need. I'll put the greater good first every time, that's how to lead. Tell all your friends to get in the mix, get the word out and get it out quick. Grab everyone you know and get your vote down. All day Tuesday, there's going to be a showdown. Because we got the strength and we got authority, the rich and corrupt are the...
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Now we are into the question and answer portion, and we have Charlene who can go through the audience with the microphone. So who would like to start off with a question? Uh-oh. You're going to make me work, are you? All right. Okay. Here we go. This one is about climate change. I'm going to guess it's for the delegates, but climate change is the most important environmental issue of our time. What do you think the Commonwealth should do about this critical issue? And I'll start with Mark Keene, but I'll bounce back and forth so Mark isn't the first one all the time. And again, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Peggy, and thank you for the question. This is obviously a very, very important question in light of what's happening. I'll give you 2 quick answers. One, of course, is for those that are studying science and trying to build a fact-based academic research, the last thing we need to do in Virginia is prosecute them, go after them with our own taxpayer funding. So that's the obvious thing that I will not do, unlike some people who have been in office in the past who just don't believe in climate change, but also are acting on that. But the real serious answer to that is, I think that climate change is an issue. It is a man-made, and many scientists who are extremely smart have already come out. There is consensus being built. One thing that we can do in Virginia is to stop and try to reduce as much as possible and conserve as much as possible and be as efficient as possible with the energy that we have. And I would love to see more alternative fuel, renewable sources of energy, and all the dreams and the visions that we have, but we can't get there if we don't stop what we're using now and conserve what we're using. So it's got to be a gradual change of efficiency and conservation. The other thing we can do is to compete with other states that are seeking these types of companies. We need to make sure that we have a mandatory renewable portfolio standard, which right now, as many of you in Virginia lags behind even some conservative states like North Carolina and other states in the South. So the portfolio standard is very important for us to make sure that we can have businesses that are attractive to our state. But there are many other ideas, I'm sure, but the one thing that I'll promise you is climate change is a topic that will be on my agenda and has been for the last 4 years. I put in bills, I've worked with Sierra Club and others to make sure that we have the environmental voice in Richmond. I'll continue to do that. So thanks for the question. I'm not sure who asked.
Thank you. That was a really good question. Back when Governor Kane first got elected, he appointed me to his Climate Change Commission. And so that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And it's a shame that more out of that commission hasn't actually been implemented. It was a bipartisan commission. It had environmental interests and business interests as well. And to me, I see this as not only an environmental issue, albeit a very, very important one, but also an economic issue. And it's economic in ways that you wouldn't even think about it. We've invested millions and millions of dollars in Virginia wine growing industry. And changes in climate, like what we're expected to see, are going to change the kind of grapes that you're going to be able to grow in Virginia. So there's lots of different ways that this is ultimately going to affect Virginia's economy. As Mark said, there's really kind of three things that we need to plan for. You know, number one is ensuring that we are taking advantage of alternative energy sources. And we have great wind power off of our Virginia Beach shore. And the nice thing is that the continental shelf goes off far enough where you're not going to even see it. And so that's something that we really need to push and encourage. And it'd be great if that wind power equipment was also built and serviced here in Virginia. We also need to look for ways to take advantage of efficiencies, whether that's smart meters or whether it's weatherization. Weatherizing a home that's older not only means that you've got affordable housing, but people can actually afford to live in it because they don't have energy going out the windows. Last but not least, you know, we need to make sure that we are protecting our infrastructure. A lot of what's happening with climate change is already happening, and so we're going to see sea level rise, and we need to make sure that we're taking that into account when we're doing our planning, and especially when we're looking to protect our vital assets, such as our port down in Hampton Roads, so that our military feels that they can stay here and be part of Virginia and not be impacted. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you very much. I probably will tag on to both of the previous speakers a little bit. Forbes named Virginia the #1 place to do business and to start a business. And I think that we need to attract businesses that will look at climate change and how they can use their skills to better the Commonwealth. I am, as I said before, I work at George Mason University. I might not know a lot about the environment at this point, but I know who to go to that it knows those, has that information and has that knowledge to better inform myself that when I am in Richmond, I will have the best, the state-of-the-art knowledge to make decisions. I believe in looking at the footprint, at the footprint of a house and how it will, you know, how you can be better better with the environment, and that the carbon footprint will be better served and not as great. So it is something we have to look at, and as we move forward, I will be better equipped to answer that question. Thank you.
Well, I got the lucky draw this time. I get to go last, and so I've already heard the answers to the question. So it's kind of like cheating here. Thank you for the question. I've got for those of you that know, I have a high school student here who's going to interview me later, and she already yelled at me once for using too much jargon. She says I got to explain these things in a way that a high school kid can even understand. So let me just expand a little bit on what you've already heard about mandatory portfolio standards. What that means is that energy companies in Virginia ought to be required to acquire a certain percentage of their energy through renewable sources. So things like wind power, solar power, alternative sources, non-carbon sources that aren't going to add to our carbon emissions and our carbon output. So I support that as well. And I think that that's something we need to look at. Another issue that we haven't talked about here, but the lack of solar incentives in Virginia. I've got a constituent who's already come to me. They're already starting to come to me. And he wanted to build a project in the city of Falls Church and wanted to put a solar hot water heater on the roof. And the response he got from the builder and the contractor was, any state but Virginia, I'd be happy to accommodate your request. But I can't do it in Virginia because the incentives don't exist to support and make it economically viable. So we need to look at creating some incentives in Virginia code that other states have to encourage the use of solar power and solar technology in some of our buildings and our new construction. We need to also look at our building code to see if we can incorporate, again, conservation issues. So when somebody goes to build a new house or a new building, are we going to hold them not just to a safety code, will the building stand up, but is there a way to make this building more energy efficient and reduce what we use as well? And then, so conservation. Those would be the things that I would sort of go at and try and help work with. And this is a chance. I had a lot of endorsements. I didn't get, my 2 minutes ran out, but the Sierra Club has also endorsed my candidacy based in large part on my position on this issue. So thanks again for the question. And I am going to give you 15 seconds back.
Okay, now that we've had that warm-up, is there anybody from the audience who would like to ask a question? Yes, sir.
For everybody, you're all running in contested races. Why are you better to vote for than your opponents?
Do you need the microphone, sir?
No, it's okay.
Did everybody hear his question? Okay.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Bulliver this time.
What are you gonna do?
The sheriffs, yes, all right. We will start with Mr. DiCarlo at the end.
You want me? Ready, set, go? I'm the most qualified sheriff because I want to protect the Constitution. And that is the big issue here. The Constitution states, that first off, the sheriff is our only elected law enforcement person. He's the highest ranking, he's the highest law enforcement person in the county. He can even deal with the feds. And what's happened is that the office has been corrupted by the political parties. And on the back of my flyer, there's a chart that explains this. In that what's happened is that whereas we are electing the sheriff to represent us, the political parties are really putting them in office. And that's how we have Big Brother, because there's nobody protecting the Constitution. And the Constitution states that the people are supposed to be the source of the power, and we all know that we aren't. And the Constitution also states that the government's supposed to be for the common good, and we know it isn't. We live here in Washington, D.C. We all work for part of the government. I mean, we eat politics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's the problem. And so I want to correct it. I want to be a sheriff that goes after the corruption, the bribery, the influence peddling, and all these other problems that have messed up this country. That's why I'm the best qualified.
Unlike any of my opponents, I am the only one that is currently a law enforcement officer, and I am the only one that has any experience with the Fairfax Sheriff's Office. I just started my 27th year. I've worked in all 4 divisions, and I know what's important to our staff. I know the expectations of the community, as well as the prisoners, as well as all the stakeholders, both internally and externally, to our agency. So we run a model facility, and again, our core functions are very different from those other law enforcement agencies, and we are responsible for managing the Adult Detention Center, providing security for the courthouse, and serving civil law process. We do a lot of other things well, too. My position at this point is I know what's important to the staff in our agency, and I'm the one who can start on November 6th and hit the ground running. So, thank you.
Okay, we might as well continue the trend. It's down this way.
So thank you, Brian, for the question. So this is an opportunity, I guess, to contrast myself a little bit with my opponent, but I think I'm going to sort of focus on myself and say that I've got a lot of experience. I've been I grew up here in the community. I lived here most of my adult life. I grew up and went to Thoreau's arch rival, if you have one, over at Longfellow Intermediate. My kids go to Kent Gardens where I went, and I went to McLean High School. So I know the community very well. It gives me a lot of insight into the concerns I think that most Northern Virginians and Fairfax County residents have and what they expect out of their leaders in Richmond. I'm an attorney. I've got a legal background. I'm a small business owner. So I started a business in 2008 in the real estate industry. So if anybody's been following real estate, 2008 was sort of a challenging time to do that. And we went from an office and a closet in Vienna to 8 offices and over 45 employees here in Northern Virginia. So I've sort of got the know-how and I bring that perspective as well of a small business owner. We have a lot of folks in Richmond that want to tell small business owners what we want, or want to tell you all what small business owners really want. And I can say, no, that's not really what we want. Let me tell you as one what's important to small businesses and small business owners. And I worked for Jim Scott and Kate Hanley early in my career. I was Jim's first legislative aide in 1990. I got to go back further than I thought. 1992. And I worked for Kate Hanley in county government for 5 years. I did constituent service. So I know sort of how the levers of government work. And so if I got a constituent that has a problem, I know where to go to get that solved and get the answer that they're looking for. I don't think, frankly, that my opponent, from what I've read of his bio on his website, he hasn't shown up for any of these debates yet, but from what I've read about him, doesn't have any similar qualifications. So.
I'm running because I think I bring a lot to the table. I have real world experience. I have been in Northern Virginia area for almost 40 years. I have been a physical therapist, and I have owned a physical therapy practice for 17 years. I bring a broad-based knowledge that physical therapy. I've been at healthcare. I'm a national spokesperson for the American Physical Therapy Association since 1998. So I've spoken on healthcare issues for a long time. I have the small business experience, and now I also am teaching at George Mason University. So I have the educational experience in working with both a college level and the high school and grammar school level. Both my children went through the Fairfax County school system. And then also the experience I had on city council for 3 terms. I was able to work across party lines, did work with the Council of Governments, and so worked with different jurisdictions, and it was a bipartisan position, city council. So the idea of being able to work across party lines to come to win-win situations and good consensus. So I appreciate your consideration for my voting for me on the 5th. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's always the toughest question to be asked. And let me just preface by saying I've known Patrice for at least 10 years and have the deepest amount of respect for her. And one of the things I'm proudest of is that we do tend to have very, very good races in the 37th District, and I appreciate her carrying on that tradition. Like Patrice, I have a very diverse background. I work for an environmental and engineering consulting firm doing environmental work. I served on the Fairfax County Consumer Protection Commission and served as chair for 7 years, and also have a background with brain injury services. I think the 2 things that I really bring to the table is number one, being a problem solver who likes to dig into the nuts and bolts. And so when the Fairfax County Consumer or Child Care Advisory Council came to me and said, hey, we have a problem by state law, we're not allowed to require that child care providers submit to a national criminal background check, although you'd think that would be something that you would normally do. They turned to me to be able to work down in Richmond to be able to get something like that passed. When the city of Fairfax was having a problem with their VRS for the police and their firefighters, they trusted me to go down there and work with the Republican, or I guess the independent chairman of the House Appropriations Committee in order to be able to get that passed. The other thing is that I do work across both sides of the aisle, and I think a great example was this last session when the governor's office actually came to me and asked if I would carry a bill on human trafficking to be able to empower people to be able to report that and help police with what is a very, very vital issue. So I'm proud that the result of that has been that the Speaker of the House has appointed me to a number of commissions where I get to go ahead and work on those issues, including the Water Commission, the Housing Commission, and also the Joint Health Care Commission. Thank you.
Well, a lot of times when candidates run for office, or when people want to run in politics, I don't think they have a clear understanding of what that job entails. So I think for us to answer why you are qualified, why you are better than the other person, I think we need to understand what the job is first. A legislator in Richmond drafts laws, amends laws, changes policies and regulations that impact our lives at the state level. We don't get involved in federal stuff. We don't get involved in county and school board issues. We get involved in state level issues. And so you need a unique set of skills that are identifiable in that area. So you need skills, you need the experience, you certainly need the motivation, and ultimately you need to be able to prove that you can do things. Richmond, like a lot of places like Washington, D.C., is a very partisan environment. It is a place where people, politics, and partisanship just pervade. Both sides throw money at the problems and try to create issues. And so you need to be able to survive through that and have a moral sense of why you're down there. In my case, my experiences have been in my 25 years in in professional work has been in and around the idea of government and making policies and regulations work better. At the federal level, at the state level, at the county level, I've spent most of my career in the private and the public sector in the policy-making, legislative, regulatory fields, and so I'm very familiar with that process. In terms of my motivation and passion, as I alluded to earlier, I came to the United States from another country that didn't know what democracy is. So if there's one thing I'm passionate about more than anything else, is the idea that this country works, that our government works, and it should work. So I'm one of these people that will never ever blame the government as a problem. I think the government is part of the solution. Government is part of the partnership that we have to have. And so I'm going to work as much as I can within the system to make the government function the best way. And the results, based on my motivation and my skills, is that in the last 4 years that I've served in this General Assembly, I think, and a lot of people have rated me in many different categories as one of the more efficient and effective members in the General Assembly. In my very first year as a minority party delegate, I passed more bills than any other freshman that whole year, except for one woman who the governor gave many, many bills to, and the speaker made sure she made those bills get passed. And so I was able to pass bills and work on the skills and the experiences that I brought.
We have a question back there. Bring the microphone.
You need to use the mic, no, so it gets picked up on the tape. And you hold it straight in like that.
Okay, this is for everybody. What one issue in your particular race do you feel is the most critical and why?
All right, we'll start with Mr. Bolivar this time.
Did y'all hear that?
Did that get picked up for you?
All right, so one issue.
What one issue?
One issue. You know, there's, I think the key to Northern Virginia's success is in the quality of life and our economy. And there's two things that drive that. One is transportation. And so, as I said, I'm very, very proud to have been part of that transportation compromise that's going to put $300 million more just in Northern Virginia, $800 million statewide. And so making sure that we continue to use that funding efficiently and effectively so that people are getting a bang for their buck out of that and trust that when we go ahead and raise revenue that it's going to go to the right place. I think that's absolutely critical to maintain. We absolutely, though, also must continue to work towards reforming our Commonwealth Transportation Board. And right now, our Commonwealth Transportation Board is not set up to adequately represent the interests of Northern Virginia or your urban areas. It's based off of district lines that were drawn in the 1930s. And so we need to reform that and ensure that we're getting our fair share on that. The other part is education. And we need to, quite frankly, do two things on education. One is to ensure that we are getting our fair share. And so if you look at the way the funding formula is set up, there are some things that don't make it fair for Northern Virginia. Those need to be changed. We also need to re-look at our standards of learning. And they certainly bring a high degree of accountability. But our teachers are dying out there because they're teaching to the test, and our kids aren't learning like they ought to be because they're feeling they're having to memorize that stuff. And so I think we really need to sit down and have a grown-up conversation about making sure that we're balancing that accountability with also ensuring that we are teaching kids to think critically for the future. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Simon? Patrice, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're going this way? We went that way last time, okay. Okay. Actually, there's two. I think right now, we really need a lot of attention on the healthcare, and the healthcare issues that have been coming forward, especially with the expansion of Medicaid. You need someone who has been down in the trenches and has been on both sides of, both as a patient and as a provider, and has understanding of Medicare and Medicaid, you need some real-world knowledge of going in on the healthcare issues, and I think I bring that to the table. If we don't look at the Medicaid and insurance and make it more efficient and cost-effective as it is now, expanding it will put us in, I think, just in dire straits. So I can bring that knowledge to Richmond. The second thing I will agree with David is education. The teaching to the SOLs and taking that, the innovation, the critical thinking, the original thought out of the process is not good. Teaching on a college level right now, I'm always amazed at what they don't know. And it's not that it's something that we need to instill, we do need to instill it on the college level, but that they didn't get those skills on the primary and the high school level is very challenging, and we need to look at that that level of education at this, to make sure that we are preparing our children, our students, as best as they possibly can to be competitive on not only a national but a world arena. Thank you.
All right, so one issue. It's a good thing I was at NVAR this morning at their Politics and Pancakes breakfast, and Paul Bagala was the guest speaker, and he describes himself as a reductionist at this meeting this morning. He said, I like to reduce things to this one issue, and so he bragged about being the guy who, along with James Carville, coined the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid," during the Clinton campaign. But if you had to come down to one thing, it's the economy. I mean, there's a lot of elements to that, but it's our economic health, it's our economic well-being, it's jobs and economic diversification, but it all boils down to the local economy. As I go out and knock on doors, I hear complaints about transportation, education, and things like that, but what they're concerned about, some of it's they're sitting in traffic, but some of it's the concern about what that's doing to our economy and our ability to diversify the local economy and attract new businesses and new industries and new jobs, because people aren't feeling like the government is as secure a place. It used to be you got a federal government job, you could clock in your 20 or 30 years and you were good to go. You didn't have to worry. You had to perform, but you didn't worry that your job was going to go away because business was bad. Now as the government's continuing to downsize and government jobs are going away, government workers have that anxiety. They've been through furloughs. They've had their pay reduced 20%. And they're experiencing a lot of economic insecurity. And so they're concerned about it. And we're concerned about losing businesses like ExxonMobil. One of the big reasons they gave for moving their headquarters back down to Houston was because their employees were tired of sitting in Northern Virginia traffic. So transportation is a big element to preserving our quality of life and attracting the businesses that we want. Education is key to that as well. We need to continue to have world-class schools, the kind of schools that when you recruit a business, that business executives and CEOs can send their kids to. Great, nationally acclaimed schools that we've got. We've got to maintain that. And then Virginia's brand. We've got to protect the brand here in Virginia. There's a risk that if we send the same crew down to Richmond, it continues to push this very aggressive right-wing agenda, we're going to lose the benefit of the great brand that we've got here in Northern Virginia.
Okay, going to keep going down the table. Back to you, Kate.
In the sheriff's race, one word would describe what I think is a key factor, and that is experience. And we have an agency that is approximately 612 strong, both civilian staff as well as sworn staff. And not having the knowledge in terms of how we run our agency and what it requires and the dynamics and the needs is a scary thing. And I'm the only one on the ticket that has any of this experience. I've served in leadership positions for over 20 years within my career. I've moved up, I've earned my merit increases, and I'm still on the executive leadership team for our agency. I have attended much leadership training, and every month we meet and we talk about things that are important in terms of what needs to be done in the sheriff's office. So experience is definitely the key factor that I think separates me from my opponents.
Basically, I want to fight Big Brother. Money is the thing that's messed this country up. And as I'm going to go back to my chart, because the chart shows then how the political parties use influence to put people in office, and then to pay the parties back, they basically provide legislation that the special interests were looking for. The interesting thing when I started running for office is, as an independent, you have to collect a lot of signatures. So to run for Congress, which I've been on the ballot twice, I had to collect 1,500 signatures each time. That means you talk to a lot of people. And basically, in these conversations, people were agreeing with my approach. I had a woman from a major media outlet, and a national media outlet, and she explained to me that for them to get an audience with someone in Congress, they had to donate not only to the congressperson, but to the political party. I had another woman at a farmer's market, and she said, "You're right." She said, "They use complexity to get away with what they want." So she says, "I know. I worked on the Hill." So this is what's going on. This is what the problem is in Washington. And my argument is that the sheriff was the one that was originally intended to fight this problem. Just as these other officers, if you look at the other constitutional officers on the chart, they all have a responsibility directly to the citizens. And that's the way it should be. And if it is, and if it works that way, then we won't have 1984. As a side point in my last 30 seconds, Delaware last year took away the right of the sheriff to arrest people. He's not going to fight any corruption that way. 2 weeks ago, they had a trial. The Delaware Supreme Court agreed that he did not have the right to arrest anybody. They only have 3 sheriffs. So you can see the tendency starting to come. And that's my concern. So I'm the most qualified because I want to fight Big Brother.
That's a tough one to follow. The question, I think, can be answered by what you've heard in terms of the education issues, making sure our schools stay strong, making sure that we're investing in our infrastructure and transportation, and all the other issues, the economy. All those things are all really important issues, and it's really hard to say what's the most important. But I think all of that won't be possible, and as voters and as citizens, as residents, none of that's possible if we don't have a sense of certainty. If we as people, residents in this area, if we don't feel comfortable and we don't trust the system, if we don't trust our institutions, I think a lot of those superficial issues will not be as important anymore. And obviously we're speaking here, I'm not sure what happened in the House today, but the House of Representatives, they're supposed to vote on whether we're going to have this debt ceiling lifted or not. The fact that we have men and women in Congress, our national elected leaders, who can't agree on whether we're going to keep our government going, the fact that the rating systems are looking at our AAA bonding, the fact that the entire world is focusing on whether we can break through the partisan gridlock just to make sure that America continues to be what it is, that creates a sense of uncertainty and discomfort among all of us and distrust in the system. That's the worst poisonous, toxic environment that I think I've ever seen in my lifetime, and certainly a lot of you probably share that concern. So how do we turn that? For me, the issue isn't about whether I'm going to be the best person on education or the best person on transportation. I'm going to work my heart out to make sure I solve those problems. But for me, I want to do everything I can so that all of you as voters have that sense of confidence and trust. And the way you have trust in any institution is the people that you put in those institutions. We've seen corruption in every segment of our society. Wall Street, government, yes, even churches. We've seen corruption and ethical immorality in all kinds of places. It's not the institutions, it's the people that you put in there. So I think all of us have a duty this year, November 5th, to pick the right people at the federal, at the state level, from governor all the way down to House and sheriff, who you can trust. I think this election is going to be all about who do you trust and who do you want to make our institutions work the way it's supposed to be done.
Questions? All right, we've got a couple of cards from the audience. Sorry. Virginia has been reducing funding for employee retirement funds. Recently, Virginia was listed near the bottom of all states in funding these plans. So delegates, how do you plan to solve this problem? And I think
My turn to go first?
so.
All right. I can't cheat off of you guys anymore. I have to come up with my own answer for this. So, yeah, Virginia has been, as I understand it, underfunding, or having not been down there, I don't have a lot of firsthand knowledge, and so hopefully some of these delegates will have some firsthand knowledge of what's been happening. But we've been underfunding VRS, the Virginia Retirement System, as a way to balance the budget. And that's something that's got to change. We need to, our public employees, make choices. I talked a little bit earlier about how it used to be a government job at least got you something called security. It may not have been the best paying job. It didn't guarantee you didn't get rich necessarily working for the government, but what you got was stability, and you got in many cases a defined benefit pension. So the deal was, I'm going to put in my time, I'm going to earn put in my years, and I'm going to earn my pension, and I'm going to earn a defined benefit. I know that at the end of this time, when I've done what I was supposed to do and held up my end of the bargain, that your end of the bargain is I get these benefits. And we can't change the system midstream. With people that are coming into the system, people that are working for the state government, and not just state government, our firefighters participate in the Virginia retirement system, our teachers participate in our Virginia retirement system. I suspect our sheriffs do, the way that Greg's nodding his head. So state police, we made a deal. Yeah, they made a deal to forego some other opportunities in exchange for that security. And so we owe it to them to fully fund the retirement system and make sure that those defined benefits are available for them when they retire.
Oh, sure. There are two somewhat related issues that are being floated around in Richmond. One is the idea of, do we go from the, as Marcus just said, from the defined benefits program to the defined contribution program? It's very technical, but do you go with a private sector 401k type, or do you stay with the government type programs that you have? So that's one issue that's out there. The other issue is the fact that Virginia, unlike some states, when we appropriate funds every single year, or 2 years for the $84 billion budget that we have for the state, even if you pass every law that says this is going to be protected, we have money here for transportation, money here for education, money here for health care and Medicaid, what have you, the budget overrides all of that. And so when you pass a budget, the appropriations bill says, well, you know what, even though we're supposed to put money there, because of emergencies, now we're going to shift a whole bunch of money, billions of dollars at a time, from here to there. And all of a sudden, you have a system where pension funds, because most of the people who are waiting for their retirement aren't sitting there waiting for that check right now, that pension money becomes fungible, and that money is moved to be used for a more urgent factor. So what we need is some fiscal discipline in Richmond. And so on the budget side, and what I was saying earlier about the defined benefits, defined contribution, just like Marcus said so eloquently, there's a reason why we set up the system as it is for government workers. You get paid less. For some first responders, you can't work as long because your physical ability to work so long is limited based on the kind of work that you do. But in return, we give you a nice, comfortable retirement so that you can use that as a security for what you put in. So we need to keep that system going. But we also need to make sure that our budget process is transparent and accountable, so that the money that we thought we had for these programs, all of a sudden we find out that money was shifted to another program. And that's happened on both sides of the aisle on many years, and so we need to make sure that that kind of transparency happens in Richmond.
First of all, good job, Marcus.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Mark said is really key, which is the fiscal discipline aspect. And Virginia is actually a pretty fiscally conservative state, and that's served us well over these many years. We fared the last recession, I think, a lot better, and it's made us stronger that our Constitution says that we have to balance our budget each biennial. And so we've had to make small, tough decisions over the long term, and that's been a good thing. However, Virginia has not always done a really good job of making the decisions today that are going to protect us in the long term. VRS is one very good one, where we've been told year after year that we were underfunding the system, or we were told what we needed to fund it at, and then in order to balance the budget, we went ahead and shortchanged it. It's the same problem we got in with transportation. We're not going to deal with it this year, we won't deal with it this year, and all of a sudden you've got a real problem on your hands. And so the issue is that we do owe it to our state employees, many of our local employees, to be able to provide them with the benefits that they deserve. They don't make a whole heck of a lot of money, but we do want to make sure that they're able to retire where they were working. And so we need to be able to do a better job of ensuring that we're stepping up to the plate as Virginians to protect infrastructure like the Virginia retirement system as we go forward.
My time on city council, I worked with the police and fire and the first responders a lot. And it was very evident to me that the idea of looking at VRS, that they felt challenged, that if there were choices that had to be made, it was possibility of their retirement being compromised. When state employees, when city employees, anybody that is involved with, say, the VRS system, they have to feel that the effort and their lives, their careers that they're putting on the line will be rewarded, will be taken care of when they retire. There is, like has been said, Virginia is really good in that we have to balance our budget every year. And there's one pot of money. We have to look at the VRS system as a priority, and that those funds cannot be compromised. It's just that there are so many, as have been said, there are so many areas that need to be taken into account. And so we have to look at the 2 or 3 chess moves out. We can't just look at that, you have a knee-jerk reaction to what is in front of us at the time. We need to look at a broader spectrum of down the road. How are we going to address and secure the needs of those that are working the hardest for us? Thank you.
Somehow my podium has slipped down. Okay. Any questions for the sheriff out there? They've been kind of quiet and neglected, I think. Okay. All right. Here's a question for both sheriffs and delegates. Are you a member of the NRA? Do you support repealing Virginia's one-gun purchase a month law? And I'll start with Mr. DiCarlo, and we'll just work our way down.
I'm not a member of the NRA, and do I support repealing the one?
One-gun purchase a month law.
No, I leave it like it is.
I am not a member of the NRA, and as far as a one gun a month law, I think 12 guns a year is sufficient, so thank you. And just one more thing, I mean, again, the sheriff's a constitutional officer, and in all kidding aside, we enforce the laws, we don't make the laws, but again, not a member of the NRA, and I support expanded background checks for everyone, regardless. So, thank you.
No, I'm not a member of the NRA. I don't know if they would have me. They'd probably send my money back and reject my application. And that's fine with me. The one gun a month, unfortunately, was repealed during this most recent legislative session, and it was really frustrating for me to see that happen. I worked for Jim. I was his legislative aide in Richmond. Did I say something wrong? No, sir. Oh, okay. It was very frustrating for me to see that happen. I was working for Jim during the Governor Wilder administration when one gun a month was passed for the first time. It was early on in Jim's career, and it was because Virginia had become a storyline in a Batman cartoon, because it was known as the place where you could come drive your, this is sort of the closest place, you come down 95, you could buy as many guns as you wanted, and you take them up and down the East Coast. And it was enough to embarrass Virginia finally into passing the one handgun purchase per month. And unfortunately, only in Virginia, I think, does a state legislature react to something like the Newtown massacre by saying, not only are we not going to introduce any new gun violence prevention rules, but we're going to take your most effective and your most popular, and we're going to flex our lobbyist muscle, and we're going to repeal that. And that's what happened in Virginia, and it infuriates me. It was a common sense gun violence prevention measure. There's no good reason to have repealed it except to show them that they could, and I would support reintroducing that bill every year that you all would send me down to Richmond.
I am not a member of the NRA, and I think it should just stay as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not a member of the NRA. I voted against the legislation that repealed one handgun a month. I think, as was mentioned earlier, that was put in place because of a real problem dealing with public safety, and I think that was effective in doing its job. I was raised to respect the Second Amendment, but also feel very strongly that we need to do all we can to prevent gun violence, and that's really the key, is how do you prevent gun violence and how do you keep those guns from getting in the hands of folks that we all agree shouldn't have those. And so I also agree with Sheriff Kincaid that we need to make sure that we are beefing up our background checks and at the very least close the gun show loophole where you can use technology that's already out there to make sure that guns don't get in the hands of those who shouldn't have them.
We were chuckling a little bit when Marcus was speaking because just a year, and I remember that year very well because in 2009 when I was elected, I went down and was sworn in 2010, and I served 2 years. And the National Rifle Association's headquarters happens to be in the 35th House District. And so when I talked in my campaign about repealing the gun show loophole and all the other gun control issues that I was campaigning on, the National Rifle Association didn't appreciate the fact that the guy who was running in their district was going after them. And so they arranged to have me serve on a subcommittee that had 5 members, 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And so I was not able to not only second a motion to pass something, but even if I voted with all my 4 hands and feet, I still couldn't stop a bill from passing. And as a result, I became the one token Democrat that served on that committee for 2 years. In my second year on that militia subcommittee, this issue came up, and for many of you know from Virginia politics history, and I think you heard this already, Governor Wilder in the 80s put this bill in as a way, a small, modest, but a common sense way to see if we can limit the number of handguns, not assault weapons, not large guns, but handguns from being sold more than once every 30 days. Since that bill had passed, landmark legislation, and by the way, Governor Bob McDonnell, when he was a delegate, supported that as well. Since that had passed, there were a number of incremental changes that the NRA was able to push in. As a result, there are a number of Swiss cheese exceptions to that. So if you're law enforcement, that doesn't apply. If you're a gun collector, it doesn't apply. If you seek a permit, it doesn't apply. If you lost your gun and you can prove that you lost it, it doesn't apply. So there were a bunch of different cheese holes that were built into that law. So it was no longer as strong of a law that it was in the 80s. And Scott Linkenfeld, the delegate who introduced that bill to repeal it, said, you know what, this law is not useful anymore because of all these Swiss cheese holes and such. And so on that committee, that's the way he convinced people to repeal it. I stood up and said, even if this law is as useless as you say it is, if it stops one less crazy person from buying a gun, I'm for it. And so I voted to keep the repeal, keep the one gun limit, but unfortunately, over many of our votes, it passed. And so we need to change that law.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Well,
Oh, wait. No, just one at a time, and you need the microphone.
All right. This is actually a question for the delegates. Oh, sure. You guys are safe on the other end. It's on. There we go. We all know that Virginia is one of the most military-friendly states in the country, and I'm proud to say as a veteran, I retired here partially because of it. I know there's a bill that's been bouncing around Richmond for a while that will allow active duty military people that are deployed overseas to vote electronically to ensure their votes are counted in an election. What's your stance on that?
We'll start with Patrice.
Okay. Actually, my daughter is in Azerbaijan with the Peace Corps, and she is voting electronically. So it is possible already. She had to apply, actually she applied online, but she was registered before she went. And so she's voting online, by email. So I think it's already in place. If it's not, I would agree that every vote counts. Every American should have the privilege to exercise their vote. And so, yes, it needs to be in place. And that the absentee ballot, there was a issue, I think, a couple elections ago that there were active duty votes that were not counted because they didn't get here in time. And the way our technology, how good it is right now, that should never happen. Thank you.
So, as a fellow veteran, I was an Army JAG officer for 3 years. I served in the military and know a lot of folks that served overseas. I would support making absentee voting easier for military members, but I think for everyone. I think that our current, I also served on the Bipartisan Election Process Improvement Commission that was assembled in February. One of the issues that came up was how complicated and difficult unnecessarily our absentee ballot procedures are. You've got to fold it the right way and put it inside a B envelope and fill out the right information on the B envelope. It's got to match what's in the A envelope. And even if anybody opening it can figure out exactly who's trying to vote, if you didn't fill in the right blanks the right way, your ballot gets cast aside. And that sort of thing ought not happen for a variety of reasons, really, to anybody. So I am all for simplifying the absentee ballot procedures for everyone and making electronic submission possible for folks overseas, military and folks like Patrice's daughter who are just overseas with the Peace Corps or anybody else.
Thank you. I agree with what Marcus is saying is that, if you've got a constitutional right to vote, we ought to make it as easy as possible in order to be able to exercise that. And so, I think we can even start right here at home with our absentee in person, where we now have a litany of, I think it's like a dozen or 17 things that you have to have an excuse for why you are not going to be able to show up on election day. And we ought to be able to simplify that so that if you don't think you're going to be there on election day, you ought to be able to exercise your right to vote. And I do know that military overseas, in particular, they have unique sets of circumstances, and thank God they're over there protecting our country. I don't know that electronic is the way specifically to do that. But I do agree, that you need to ensure that if you're over there fighting for our country, protecting us as the United States, that we ought to make it as easy as possible for you to exercise that right to vote. And thank you for your question.
Well, first, thank you for your service. I appreciate the fact that you've worn the uniform, and so many others in Virginia have. In fact, Virginia has 1 out of 10 voters in Virginia is a military veteran, and we try our best in a bipartisan way to be the most veteran-friendly state. And so we've passed a lot of bills throughout the last 4 years, at least I've been in the office, trying to make sure that we take care of what we might consider to be somewhat of a nuisance. So, for example, if you were deployed overseas and you come back home and you find out that your driver's license expired, and the first thing you're going to do isn't to go down and wait in line for DMV. So I passed a bill last year and the year before that would extend the grace period for that, and a number of bills like that, including jobs for military veterans that transition. So those are areas that I've been focusing on. But I think I absolutely agree with everybody here who said that we should do everything we can to make voting easier. But just from wearing my legal hat for a second, I think you're going to face some equal protection issues if you said, if you're in the military, you can vote electronically, but if you're not in the military, but you're, say, stationed at the same country, you can't. So I don't think you can distinguish between the military. What you can do, I think, will pass muster, is if you maybe either have different deadlines for when the absentees can start if you're deployed overseas, or maybe even the simplest thing, if we can't do the electronic, and I think you should be able to, but if we can't for whatever reason, make an overseas precinct. So if you're in the military in Afghanistan, you have one precinct that's the Afghan precinct for Virginians, or for wherever we may be next station, so that every single one of those votes counts. And last year, 2 years ago, I think it was, during the presidential campaign, there was an organization that was started specifically nationally to address that issue, and I worked with them a little bit. Unfortunately, they couldn't get their act together in early enough time to solve some of the problems that you did hear about. But that is definitely a national priority. We all ought to be working together on that. Thanks.
10 seconds.
Yeah, you can have my 10 seconds. The red flag didn't go up yet.
No, I just because it's a really good question, and I do get involved with the Military and Veterans Caucus and the House of Delegates. Each year, the Joint Legislative Council for Veterans works with the Department of Veteran Services in Virginia. You've got a number of the different veterans organizations, Vietnam Veterans, VFW, American Legion, and they all come up with their joint package for what they would like to see the General Assembly do for a particular year. And I'd be more than happy to raise that issue to them and to see if it's something they want to tackle.
We just have time for a few more questions, so I'm going to take one from the card and then we'll go back to the audience. And this is a question for the delegates. What legislation would you support, if any, to improve financial campaign ethics in Virginia. Are current disclosure laws adequate for elected officials? And we'll start with,
Well, I have a point of order. I just want to make sure that Patrice gets her equal time. So I think that David should have 10 minutes, 10 seconds docked from his time because that lasts a little bit.
Or maybe give Patrice more time on this answer?
That will-
okay,
Give you 10 extra seconds.
that's a good point. Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll just remember, when Patrice gets up, she gets.
Or I can do an addendum.
Well, ethics, this is one of the issues that have come up, obviously, very prominently in the headlines in the last few months in Virginia. But as Chris was saying earlier, ethics and corruption is an issue that's all across the board in every institution. In Virginia, we have two sets of laws. One is financial disclosure as an elected official. So if I am in office and somebody gives me a gift, there are rules that are required for me to disclose that publicly. There's a dollar amount and a timing on that. We've now seen it's not only inadequate, but we all thought that the law was a certain way. It turns out it's not. So if somebody gives my wife a gift, apparently you didn't have to report it. I didn't realize that. I've been reporting, just as a family member. So that, I think, is a no-brainer. We should make sure that immediate family members who receive gifts also disclose it at the same time that people like us do. And also, timing-wise, right now under the law, that's required once a year. I think we should disclose that, fairly, whether it's 3 times a year or online, whatever it might be. So there's another online solution to that problem, transparency. On the campaign finance side, which is not the same thing as gifts that you receive as an elected official. So if somebody wants to take me to a dinner and we have a conversation, and if that reaches a threshold, that's the personal disclosure. On this side is campaign disclosure. This is when somebody comes and says, I want to support your campaign. I want to write a check to your campaign. That disclosure happens on a periodic basis. In fact, today was a disclosure date for the last 1 month. And that is done on a fairly transparent basis. There's an organization called the Virginia Public Access Project. They do a pretty good job with that. The issue there in Virginia is we have no limits. There are no limits, nor do we have limits on the sources of funds. So unlike federal government, where a member of Congress can only accept up to about $2,600 a month or something like $2,600 per person. In Virginia, there are no limits. So that's one of the issues that's come up is, if you don't have limits, then somebody can come in and literally buy $1 billion worth of ads. And so those are some of the issues that we'll be dealing with next year.
I think Mark did a really nice job of kind of giving a summary of what needs to happen at a minimum. Most of us down in the General Assembly are good, hard-working folks, and so it's very critical that we take this opportunity to step up to the plate and close what I think are some egregious loopholes that unfortunately got exposed as a result of what happened with the governor. Mark mentioned, the openness thing. Timing is absolutely critical. Again, right now we report gifts only once a year. It's after the elections. It's in January. That needs to be on the same pace as our other financial disclosure reporting. We also need to have a place like the Virginia Public Access Project where you can get access to that. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to report it if people can't see what it is that you're reporting. And so we need to do that. We also need to close that family loophole. And finally, last but not least, is we do need to have some independent ethics commission. Right now, we have a House and a Senate separate ethics commissions that have some power, but really it's kind of the fox guarding the hen house. There's not really much openness and accountability to those processes. And I really feel strongly that we need to step back and say, hey, let's give a commission enough power to be able to do their own kind of investigations, to be able to put some sunshine on that, to get some openness and accountability. And in fact, we had an opportunity, I think it was back in 2007 or 9 when we had the last ethics problem, where a bill was proposed and I was a co-patron to establish a more robust ethics oversight commission. And unfortunately, we didn't do that then. I think now we need to take that up again. Thanks.
When you run for office, you kind of open yourself up to scrutiny, and no one should be above the law. We all know what's right and what's wrong, and how to, be fair and equitable. In all dealings we need to, like, that golden rule, it has served us well for a very, very long time. And anybody in office, you need to be able to look and say, I am an open book. I have put, my gifts online, both personal and things for the campaign. Yes, there's so much going on in Richmond right now that needs attention. Yes, there has to be more openness, there has to be more accountability, and people should take that on as a personal quest, a personal challenge to be able to be open and say what you've been getting. Yes, now we have to look, everything has come a little bit more to the forefront because of what has happened in Richmond lately. And, we need to be responsible. As those representing the people, you need to be more responsible and more accountable. And the idea of bringing more government into being honest, you should be on. It's too bad that we're going to have to spend a lot of time and money, on being on what people are doing. If you just were open and accountable to begin with, we probably wouldn't be where we are now. So yes, going to Richmond, we do need to be. Everyone should be more accountable for their actions. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about something a little different, I guess, than what everybody else has talked about, but it's on the same vein. First, the way that the system's supposed to work, right? I get it. We were a full disclosure state. So the idea is, I get all this money in, and I disclose it, and you get to see who gave it to me, and then I disclose everything that I spend. And if you don't like the way I'm spending my money, then you vote me out, right? That's the way it's supposed to work. Everything's there, and it's all there to be seen and searched somewhere online, or if you go down to the clerk's office and ask for the piece of paper for the financial disclosures, you can get it. And that's, in theory, the way it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, that's not, I think, the most effective way. You talk about, Mark talks about being surprised at some of the things that are illegal. As a first-time candidate, I'm awfully surprised at some of the things that I can do with my campaign contributions. I worked as one of my jobs in the Army as an Army lawyer was to run the tax center. And I have soldiers come to me all the time, and they'd want to write off their dry cleaning expenses on their taxes. So you can't do that. You got to do that. I want to drive the mileage it takes me to get to and from work. You can't write off that mileage. That's what it takes to commute. That's not a business expense. Well, as a campaign, as I go work on my campaign, there is nothing that says I can't take the money that you contribute to my campaign and say, you know what? I come to a lot of these debates now. I need to get some new suits. I need to look good because I'm in front of people a lot. So I'm going to charge off a couple new suits and my dry cleaning bill every month to my campaign account. And there's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing that stops me from spending it on what most people would consider, what the IRS would consider personal expenses, not business expenses, not campaign expenses. So when you have that combination with unlimited contributions from any source, the line between a campaign contribution and a gift and a bribe becomes kind of blurry, doesn't it? I mean, here's $2,000. Go spend it well. But disclose it. I've got to disclose my report. Hey, look, Marcus spent $314 at Tony's Cleaners. You're supposed to now go and make this. Oh, geez, we need to vote him out. I mean, that's really the only remedy you've got is to vote me out of office. I don't know that that's the most effective way to do that. I think that process can probably be improved. The incumbents are looking at me like, why are you messing it up?
Why is dry cleaning so expensive?
Why is dry cleaning so expensive? But yeah, I think that process can be improved. I mean, we've got the Internal Revenue Code. We've got a pretty good model, a good baseline. We could start from there. So I think that's the kind of thing that needs to be looked at. Because yes, I get the theory. It's nice and clean. And in theory, everybody goes and we all pour over the VPAP reports, which how many of you have heard of VPAP for the first time tonight? Right? So you know that you can go look it up and find it and vote us out if you don't like what you find there. But I think that unfortunately, trusting everybody to just be really honest, we learned, unfortunately, that public officials sometimes disappoint us. And I think we need to have some pretty clear guidelines in place and some pretty bright line rules so we're not in a gray area anywhere.
delegate candidate, Mr. DiCarlo, would like to address this as well.
A friend told me a couple years ago about the Eisenhower farewell speech, and I don't know if many of you have ever seen that, where he warns everybody about the military-industrial complex. And I thought it was fascinating, because he's basically predicted in 1958 or something like that what we have today. So you also have the agricultural industrial complex. There's a lot of industrial complexes that are putting a lot of money to get what they want from our government. Personally, I don't think disclosure really makes that much difference. Nobody's reading the financial reports. What it really comes down to is the people that you elect. And unfortunately, we've created a system that is so dependent on bringing in money to maintain yourself in office, and in essence, then keep out the outsiders. It's all become money. And they don't necessarily have to give it to you as the elected official. They can give it to the political party. And I'm sure there's a network as to how all that works. As an illustration, there was a friend of mine in the neighborhood, and this is a few years back, and we were chatting, and he was like, "Chris, I don't know why you bother." And he was confirming that it was all about money. He said, "I just went to a congressman, and I'm not going to name his name, a congressman's fundraiser, where he complained about fundraising. But still, we all gave him $2,000 each, or something to that effect." So I think the answer in the end is you've got to get the money out of the system, and that's the only way that you'll get control of the government back, so that the people become the source of the power once again.
Okay, we just have time for one last question. I'll go to the card then. This is for the delegates. To what extent do you think taxpayer money should fund private or religious education? We'll start with Delegate Keene.
The First Amendment to the United States Constitution has, as you know, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of religion. And under that, the Supreme Court in the last 5 or 6 decades now have come up with a set of laws that we all follow at the state, at federal, local levels. It's called the Lemon Test. And the Lemon Test has requirements on what state government funds, taxpayer funds, can be used for in the religious context and what cannot be. The bright line is whether you're using it for proselytizing, meaning that you're using your taxpayer money to further a religion or to pay for those things that are fundamental to the religious experience. So, for example, there are exceptions to the rule for when you pay for a bus to take a kid to a sporting activity at a parochial school. But you can use that money to buy a Bible that's been used in the classroom to be taught. So it's not, the reason I give you this long background is it's not easy to say yes or no. It's just not, just the way the case law has evolved. In Virginia, unfortunately, we've taken that a little bit further step by creating a new tax credit now, which we passed over strenuous objection from many people on my side of the aisle, that now we are allowing corporations to give a tax-deductible donation. That money is then used to pay for scholarships of kids who are going straight to parochial schools and Catholic schools and other religious schools, so that they're getting Catholic or religious education funded directly by tax credits. So I think that crosses the Lemon Test. We're waiting to see what happens. I think is in litigation. But so that's the best answer I can give you, because that's what the current state of the law is, and I obviously follow the law.
And I guess let me echo what Mark said. I think he said it very, very well. And I voted against the bill that would have funneled, well, actually it is going to funnel, I think it was $10 million back door to go to religious and private institutions. And in addition to the constitutional issues, which I take very, very seriously, and the fact that our Constitution says we support public education, and in addition to the idea that if you are taking money out of the general fund and sending it to private and religious education, you're wreaking havoc with our local school board budgets. The other issue comes down to some of that accountability. And I know we had an earlier conversation about making sure that we balance that accountability with the joy of learning. But you got to realize that those private institutions, whether they are secular or whether they are religious, aren't accountable to our standards of learning. They're not accountable to a lot of the things that we send our own schools to. And so I support anybody who decides they want to do religious education. If they want to do homeschooling, that's fine. That's a personal decision. But it's not fair to be able to divert that public money to those when they in kind don't come back and say they're going to be accountable to those standards that we've set for our children.
Fairfax has one of the best school systems in the country. And I think that we need to keep the funds where they are going now, be able to keep the funds that are due Northern Virginia in Northern Virginia, and not have to send some of the fundings that we have to other parts of the state. We need to be able to keep with what's legal and what is in the code now at this point, and the idea of personal choice. If people choose to have their children go to schools outside of our Fairfax, or outside of the state funding, that is their choice. Thank you.
Can you get the question one more time?
Yes.
Just want to make sure I'm not missing.
To what extent do you think taxpayer money should fund private or religious education?
Okay, the reason I asked that, I want to make sure I heard the answer, because there's two issues. I mean, the one is what can you do with taxpayer money, which I think Mark and David answered very well, and it's the subject of some litigation. But there's also the question of what should you do. And my view is that you shouldn't spend it that way. I think my taxpayer money should be used to support public schools. I'm a big, big believer in public schools. I think that any money that gets siphoned away from the public schools is a mistake. It shouldn't be done that way. If people want to send their kids to private schools or parochial schools, that's their option, that's their choice, and they ought to find a way to pay for it. I don't think we need an alternative to the public schools. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I don't think kids are being corrupted here. I don't think people are learning bad lessons. I don't think that there's anything they need to be protected from that they can only get in a religious school. I don't see any of those issues. I think those are all artificial, and so I don't really see a compelling need to divert tax money. Whether you can or you can't, again, the courts can decide that, but whether you should or not is a pretty easy answer for me. I don't see the compelling need to pull that money out of public schools and divert it over there to parochial schools. And so I think we should keep it all in building. And if there are public schools that are failing or are struggling, we ought to put the resources back into helping those public schools and those public school students succeed, and not in siphoning it off. So thank you.
Okay. All right, well, that ends the question and answer portion. You'll have a little bit of time to have some one-on-one with the candidates. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the candidates for coming night after night. I especially want to thank Providence District Council for their help in getting the venue, advertising it, helping this be a success. So, thank you all.